In 1965, CBS sent an American family into the deep cosmos, and millions of viewers followed them into the dark. But behind the bright Technicolor sets and rubber space monsters sat three reels the network desperately tried to sanitize, lock away, or quietly purge from TV listings. From racially charged caricatures that triggered affiliate blackouts to a $600,000 lost pilot buried for 3 decades, these are the lost chapters of television history that executives tried to kill. Castles in Space. The affiliate blackouts by its 3rd season, the series had largely abandoned its tense, survivalist roots in favor of extravagant, colorful space fantasies. The Robinson family was no longer just fighting for survival on an alien world. They were encountering space Vikings, cosmic gladiators, intergalactic carnivals, and eccentric planetary warlords. But when the 14th episode of the 3rd season rolled off the production line, its execution pushed network standards far beyond what several regional broadcast executives were willing to transmit into local living rooms. Titled Castles in Space, the episode dropped the crew into a high-stakes standoff on a freezing, desolate planet. The plot centered on an ice princess frozen in suspended animation who is accidentally thawed out by Dr. Smith. She is pursued by a ruthless silver-skinned bounty hunter named Chavo. On paper, the story promised a classic, swashbuckling space adventure with frozen fortresses, laser shootouts, and high drama. But when the master tapes reached network screening rooms, the portrayal on screen ignited an immediate, quiet panic among program directors. The source of the firestorm was the depiction of Chavo, the episode's main antagonist. Played by character actor Alberto Monti in heavy makeup and exaggerated costuming, Chavo was written as a bizarre, heavily caricatured bandito figure. The character spoke in an exaggerated accent, brandished a weapon like a Wild West outlaw, and displayed traits that mirrored deeply insensitive ethnic stereotypes. In a particularly absurd plot point, Chavo even gets the robot drunk on tequila to extract information. Across the country, several local station managers, particularly in major metropolitan television markets, viewed the character portrayal as egregiously inappropriate and culturally regressive, even by the relaxed standards of mid-century network television. When broadcast day arrived, the pushback was swift. Rather than airing the episode across their regional networks, several prominent TV affiliates quietly altered their primetime schedules. In multiple major markets, stations blacked out the broadcast entirely, substituting syndicated movies, sports reruns, or local news programming in its place. Viewers who tuned in expecting to see the Robinson family found their screens blacked out or replaced without warning. The network received a wave of complaints from viewer advocacy groups and local station directors demanding higher standards for prime-time network broadcasts. The controversy forced studio executives to reassess how far they could push character caricatures in prime-time slots. While the episode was included in original network logs, it was quietly flagged during post-network syndication runs. 4 years afterward, when local channels bought rerun packages for afternoon television slots, Castles in Space was frequently pulled from the broadcast rotation or skipped over entirely by local station programmers who feared renewed backlash from local audiences. The tapes were quietly shelved, becoming a prime example of how studio missteps and cultural insensitivity could turn a mainstream family show into a target of quiet network censorship. If a single offensive character portrayal could trigger regional blackouts on live television, what would happen when an entire $600,000 pilot episode proved too dark and disturbing for network executives to air? No Place to Hide. The $600,000 vaulted pilot episode in the mid-60s, spending $600,000 on a single television pilot was an astronomical, almost unheard-of gamble for any network project. Adjusted for modern inflation, that sum represents millions of dollars poured into 49 minutes of unproven science fiction footage. Producer Irwin Allen threw everything he had at the screen to secure a prime-time slot on national television. Sweeping, cinematic matte paintings, expensive mechanical miniatures, elaborate physical sets, and high-octane action sequences. Yet, despite this staggering financial investment and incredible technical craftsmanship, the original 1965 pilot episode, titled No Place to Hide, was flatly rejected by network executives and buried deep inside the studio vaults for nearly 3 decades. The reason for this total executive lockout was not a lack of production quality, but a radical mismatch in overall tone, narrative drive, and core character dynamics. The original pilot presented a starkly different vision of space exploration than the one that eventually captivated millions of households every week. Designed strictly as a serious, hard-edged survival drama, the story followed the crew of the Gemini 12, a sleek, saucer-shaped vessel carrying a pioneer family on a daring mission to colonize a distant planet in the Alpha Centauri system. When a rogue meteor shower strikes the ship mid-flight, the controls lock up, throwing the astronauts violently off course and stranding them on a hostile, uncharted alien world filled with extreme sub-zero weather and towering Cyclops giants. On paper, it was a thrilling, straight-laced space adventure that treated the cosmos with absolute gravity and scientific earnestness. But when network executives sat down in the private screening room to review the $600,000 reel, they felt an unsettling, undeniable void. The pilot was undeniably dark, heavy on technical jargon, and emotionally distant from the audience. More importantly, the version delivered to the network was completely missing the two pivotal figures that would come to define its pop culture identity. There was no scheming, manipulative villain, and there was no environmental control robot to interact with the crew. Without a central antagonist to drive internal human conflict or a metallic foil to bring humor, warmth, and heart to the narrative, the network feared the series would prove far too bleak, dry, and terrifying for prime-time family viewing. Rather than airing the expensive footage or scrapping the entire multi-million-dollar investment, network executives made a drastic, non-negotiable demand. They ordered Allen to pull his cast back onto the sound stages, completely overhaul the premise, and introduce both a covert saboteur and a mechanical companion to balance the family dynamic. The original pilot was quietly pulled from broadcast schedules, sealed in a metal vault, and kept strictly out of public sight until decades later. The expensive sets were altered, new actors were brought in, and large portions of No Place to Hide were painstakingly re-edited, chopped up, and blended with newly filmed scenes to create a far lighter, campier series premiere. The vaulting of the original pilot stands as a fascinating, pivotal turning point in television history. Had the network aired that $600,000 reel as originally filmed, viewers would have received a grounded, gritty space survival epic focused purely on human endurance against an unforgiving universe. Instead, studio heads chose to lock away the original vision, opting to pivot toward a lighter, character-driven format that fundamentally altered the course of mid-century science fiction television. What happens when the missing villain brought in to fix a vaulted pilot secretly hijacks the entire production from the inside? The reluctant stowaway, the scrubbed villain. When studio executives ordered Irwin Allen to overhaul the vaulted pilot, they knew the show needed a catalyst, a force of friction to drive the narrative forward on a weekly basis. Enter Dr. Zachary Smith, played by veteran character actor Jonathan Harris. Introduced in the newly filmed premiere, The Reluctant Stowaway, Smith was originally written as a cold-blooded, calculating foreign operative tasked with sabotaging the mission from within. He was intended to be a sinister, ruthless villain whose covert actions would trap the crew in deep space before he met a swift, tragic end within the first few episodes. But what ended up on screen was a complete subversion of the studio's original vision, forcing producers to quietly re-edit and alter the darker cut of the series premiere. In the original script and initial takes, Dr. Smith was devoid of warmth or comedic charm. He was a lethal agent of a hostile foreign power who programmed the onboard environmental control robot to destroy the ship's guidance systems shortly after launch. In a twist of fate, Smith's own treachery backfired, trapping him aboard the departing vessel as it blasted off into the cosmos. On set, however, Jonathan Harris quickly recognized a fatal flaw in the material. As written, a purely evil, static villain who constantly plotted killing and sabotage had a very short shelf life on a family television program. Harris knew that if his character remained a cold-hearted killer, the crew would eventually have no choice but to maroon him, throw him out of an airlock, or write him out of the show entirely. Determined to save his job and redefine the character, Harris began taking subtle, unauthorized creative liberties during filming. Between takes and during rehearsals, he introduced a dramatic shift in performance style. He abandoned the low, menacing tone of a Cold War spy in favor of a theatrical, cowardly, and pompously articulate persona. He began improvising now iconic alliterative insults directed at the robot, transforming tense, life-threatening scenes into moments of dark comedic relief. When producers saw the footage in daily rushes, they realized Harris had unlocked a completely unexpected dynamic. Rather than a terrifying monster, Dr. Smith had become a delightfully pathetic, self-serving coward that audiences couldn't take their eyes off of. This unscripted transformation presented studio executives with a massive dilemma. The network had ordered a serious sci-fi survival show with a dangerous antagonist, but the filmed footage contained a villain who was rapidly morphing into a comedic anti-hero. Recognizing that Harris's performance was magnetic, producers ordered emergency re-edits of The Reluctant Stowaway. Darker, more threatening dialogue was systematically dubbed over or cut out entirely. Scenes depicting Smith as an irredeemable, cold-blooded killer were scrubbed from the broadcast master, softening his actions so that his presence aboard the ship remained palatable to prime-time network censors and young viewers. The radical restructuring of the premiere fundamentally altered the course of the series. By softening the original, darker cut of Dr. Smith, the show stepped away from high-stakes military espionage and embraced the theatrical, character-driven melodrama that defined its run. The cold-blooded KGB-style saboteur was buried forever in the cutting room floor, replaced by the cowardly, scheming doctor who would ultimately hijack the entire focus of the show. With its iconic villain secured and its trajectory altered forever, how did a show born out of studio re-edits and vaulted footage launch into a primetime television phenomenon? The 60s sci-fi revolution. How Lost in Space conquered television. Let's look at the broader landscape of network television during the height of the space race to understand the sheer magnitude of the phenomenon that swept across American living rooms in September 1965. NASA's real-world Gemini missions were capturing global headlines, and public fascination with space travel was reaching a fever pitch. Producer Irwin Allen, already dubbed the Master of Disaster for his cinematic thrillers, recognized that the home audience was starving for high-stakes cosmic adventure. When Lost in Space debuted on CBS, it was not merely another program joining the fall lineup, it was a bold, expensive gamble that revolutionized how science fiction was produced, marketed, and consumed on primetime network television. When the show hit the airwaves, its visual presentation set a staggering new standard for broadcast television. The series boasted incredible production values for its era, including intricate miniature models built by Hollywood veteran L.B. Abbott, sweeping pyrotechnic displays, and elaborate soundstage environments designed to mimic alien worlds. The iconic Jupiter 2 spacecraft, a two-deck, saucer-shaped vessel complete with glowing control panels, hydraulic elevators, and cryo-sleep pods, cost tens of thousands of dollars to construct and gave the production a grand, cinematic weight. During its first season, filmed in crisp, atmospheric black and white, the series maintained a tense, dramatic edge. Audiences tuned in by the millions every Wednesday night to watch the Robinson family battle unforgiving extraterrestrial environments, cosmic storms, and hostile alien flora. The ratings were an instant triumph for CBS, crushing competing network programs and proving that primetime audiences would eagerly tune in for serialized space exploration every week. However, the show's greatest test arrived in early 1966 with the sudden explosion of ABC's Batman TV series. The pop art, campy superhero sensation surged in the ratings, forcing every major network to rethink its mid-week strategies. Irwin Allen and CBS responded with a radical pivot of their own. Starting in Season 2, Lost in Space made a triumphant leap into brilliant, saturated Technicolor. The transition to color fundamentally changed everything. The stark, shadows and dust aesthetics of the first season gave way to vibrant neon hues, colorful alien costumes, and increasingly bizarre, outlandish storyline.